Hello, welcome to this overview of the research and development preliminary product package contained within the ESS BIZTOOLS starter package. I'm Peter Towers, Managing Director of ESS BIZTOOLS. Welcome to this overview. The start of innovation. This is a very important concept when you look at the services that you can provide to your clients. Accountants are not just there to record past events. Our role, I believe, is to be able to assist our clients to undertake innovative activities, to create great businesses, to develop new knowledge, to protect that new knowledge by, first of all, receiving whatever grants are available from the government, but then alerting your clients to the concept of applying for a provisional patent and protecting the investment that they have made in new ideas and new systems. So welcome to the innovation journey. This is the first part of it. And what we have attempted to do is to give you the tools and the resources at a preliminary interview to be able to answer questions from a client as to what research and development is all about. So it starts with an idea. It's where everything starts. It might have been a young apprentice on a factory floor. It might have been a computer programmer. Someone's come up with an idea and said, would this work? Normally that person will go and tell someone, the foreman, the supervisor, the manager. And that person will talk to the owner or the CEO of that business, and they might decide to form a small project, to appoint a team. And that team would conduct some preliminary investigations. What you should be stressing to them is the need to keep notes, to jot down everything that happens, the date, the time, who participated in this, especially if anyone participated who was not an employee of the business. And this could be the start of a research and development project for your client. So the way we've designed this particular package is so that if you received an inquiry when you're talking to a client, that you could click onto your screen and you could read off the material there. And I'm going to give you a brief overview of what that might be now. To claim the Australian government's research and development rebate, the applicant who undertook all of the expenditure, conducted all of the experiments, was a company. Now, the client you're sitting opposite at present might be a sole trader, a partnership, or a trust. You need to tell them that if they're going to claim this taxation benefit, that is 43.5% of the legitimate research and development expenditure in the 12 months. Doesn't matter how many projects that they're running. They can claim 43.5% of it. That's what applies to companies with a turnover of under $20 million. But they must spend more than $20,000 in the financial year. But it can be on a number of projects, not just one. Could be 10, 20, doesn't matter. But they need to keep the records. Who worked on it? What were they trying to achieve? And I'm going to go through that in a bit more detail with you now. They need to conduct prior art searches. What are they? I can hear you asking, but I'm going to assure you many clients ask that. This is a quaint term, isn't it? Prior art searches. But it's basically checking with universities or experts and on the internet to see if someone else has already registered this type of process as a patent somewhere in the world, not just Australia, somewhere in the world. And your client needs to document those searches or the results of those searches. So if they put in keywords, they need to record the keywords they put in to the internet. Or if they consulted with a university or an expert in their field, they've documented what they briefed that person to look for. They may have gone to a patent attorney. They're experts in doing this sort of checking. It's probably worth the expense if this looks like being a great idea. Because the Australian government will not allow the taxation benefits, the extra benefits, to accumulate to the company if someone else has already registered this somewhere in the world, because they've got a patent. The documentation of the prior art searches is very important, because it might be 2, 3, 4 years after this event that an inquiry comes from either AusIndustry, who is the government department who assesses whether the research and development activities was reasonable and wasn't duplicating what someone else had already registered somewhere else in the world, and the tax office who control the money side of it all. And if an audit is conducted, your client needs to be in a position to be able to prove that when they started this project, they undertook all of this research. Here's the printouts they got from the computer, all the reports they got from their consultants or their patent attorney or their or the university department they approached. And all of these documents should be dated and signed. This is what we got, and filed away, so that that proof is available. Because that audit might be, as I said, 2 to 4 years' time. And in that intervening period, somewhere in the world, someone may have patented this concept. But your client will still be able to claim the expenditure they incurred on this project if they have documented when they undertook their research that they couldn't find that anyone had patented that idea. So they can still claim the benefit. And incidentally, you can claim research and development expenditure, even if the research proves that it was not a good idea, that it didn't work, as long as the documents are being kept. That's what you need to stress to your clients. And then we move into some of the interesting components. Identify the core activities proposed from the research. Now, one other thing I should add that I refer to a little bit later on is I think you should be encouraging your client to produce a research and development plan. What are they trying to achieve? It's like a business plan for a research and development project or projects, because your client might be undertaking more than one project. If so, they're all separate. I had one client that had about 40 projects, and each had a number and each was treated quite separately because they were all separate activities within the industry they were in. They were spending a lot of money, about $3.5 to $4 million a year. So it was a big claim for research and development. So we need to identify the core activities. What's the plan of attack? What are we trying to achieve? And they need to identify new knowledge intended to be produced. So they need to have some vision of what the end game is going to be. What's the new knowledge that they're proposing to produce? But this outcome cannot be determined or known in advance on the basis of current knowledge, information, or experience. That's a little bit difficult, I think, but that's what the law says. The outcome cannot be known or determined in advance on the basis of current knowledge, information, or experience. Your client needs to think about that and make a note in their files. In fact, we have forms for every step of this. There was 46 forms within the ESS BIZTOOLS package for research and development. I don't think you're going to need them all for one client, but if you handle 10 or 12 R&D claims in a year, you might need nearly all those forms, depending on what the various configurations with your clients have been and what they need. The knowledge can only be determined by applying a systematic progression of work. So this is, again, identifying the need for some pre-planning. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And documenting it in the plan. And the hypotheses or hypotheses that they're trying to prove one way or the other by experiments. So they need to have sat down and thought about, well, what are we trying to determine here? True or false? Will this work or won't it work? And as I said a little bit earlier, if it turns out that nothing works, as long as the records are being kept and the processes are being followed, your client can claim the R&D rebate. They won't have a product that might be potentially worth a lot of money in some future date because it hasn't worked. It didn't turn out the way they hoped it would. So that's the key components that we've got there to get the innovation started. So in this pre-planning process, the research and development plan should then be prepared. Not at the end of the project, at the very beginning. Documented, signed off. And a budget is a good idea. Now, I should stress that the legislation does not require for a small company under 20 million turnover to actually produce a research and development plan. Doesn't mention budgets at all. I think that's just good accounting sense. For a larger company, they must prepare an R&D plan. I think you should be stressing to your client the need to do exactly the same, even though their turnover might be very close to zero. In fact, could be zero. Because to answer those questions that I've just highlighted to you, they need to have done some pre-planning and some thinking. The R&D plan should then be submitted to the board of directors, even if it's only a one director company. We should go through the process. And you might be saying, well, this sounds all very technical. Well, unfortunately it is, because the research and development legislation in Australia has been based on the government's understanding of what happens in universities on a research and development project, especially where they're receiving funding from the government or some other external organisation. They prepare a plan. They identify what they're trying to achieve. They make sure someone else hasn't already done it. And they outline what the steps are going to be. They prepare a budget. They need to get funding. And it's the way that the government understands big business undertake research and development activities. Now, because smaller companies are on the same legislation as what the larger companies are in Australia, small businesses need to abide by the same regulations, the same processes, and you need to make sure your clients understand that. And then we move into obtaining board of directors approval. So within the ESS BIZTOOLS packages, one of those 46 forms is a draft of a submission to the board of directors for approval. Research and development project number 1. The aim is, whatever it is, the details, answering some of those key questions. If I just go back to them, so we remember. Some of the key questions that need to be included in the research and development plan, we've already discussed. So let's just go back to them and just have a quick look at them again. We need to make sure that your client's going to spend more than $20,000 in the financial year. They need to understand they're going to keep records, and that should be summarised in the business plan. They should have a heading on conducting prior art searches and another heading on the recording of what they find from the prior art searches. The core activities are very important, and that would be a heading on its own. You need to identify the new knowledge intended to be produced. And it's a good idea to outline their systematic progression of work that they intend, and to identify their hypothesis or the hypotheses that they're going to use to conduct their experiments. So that's the overview of the process to produce the research and development plan and to get started on this overall process. I'm now sharing with you the members homepage of ESS BIZTOOLS. And on the left-hand side here, where we have subscribe content, I'm going down to click onto the research and development introduction package, and I'm going to download that content. What you can see on the screen now is a list of the contents of this particular package that you've got available for you to use in your organisation. And the form that we're seeking is the planning a research and development. This is the flow chart. So I'm clicking onto that now. So on the screen now, you have the planning a research and development project flowchart that we have developed. Starts with the idea, then moves into a project. You'll see on the right-hand side here, we've got references. That's the paper, one of the introductory papers on research and development, that if you haven't started on this journey yet, please read it. And then we got the BAS forms. Business Advisory Services is what the BAS stands for, and they've all got a separate number. And you can just click onto those when you're using this with your client and bring those forms up. We won't do that in a webinar like this. From the idea that the project might be agreed to by the management. In some instances, there'd be a small team form, might only be 1 or 2 people, to conduct some preliminary investigation. So the purpose of these flowcharts is for you to guide your client through the process, to give them the feeling that you know what you're doing. You've got all the tools and you can utilize them. And please use them. And if you find that there's some questions you've got or problems you've got, please communicate with us and tell me, and we'll make adjustments if need be. Preliminary investigations. And then we can look at the eligibility requirements. Now, we've already summarised some of those, which we've been through. Turnover under 20 million for this particular segment. Must spend more than $20,000 in the financial year on a legitimate R&D project. Must be a company, a proprietary limited company, and so on. And the full paper there, 052005, summarises all that. Then we get into this prior art searches, and there's a special form for you to give to your client for them to complete and for you to check that they've done it properly. And the identification of the documentation that they've used for the prior art searches, very important, as I've stressed earlier. List the core activities proposed for the project. That's covered in paper 052010. But there must be at least one core activity in every research and development project. And that's to be summarised in the form 5514. The new knowledge intended to be created, these core activities, there's more discussions about them in the paper and then in 5514. And what's the hypothesis or the hypotheses? And again, details of those should be included in BAS form 5514. Now, let me stress at this stage, there's no need for your client to stick religiously to this for a full 12-month period, or whatever time it is between there and the 30th of June. If they come across the concept that they need further activities undertaken, they'll make a note of that and they start completing some new forms. They might be the same number. They just put an A, B, or C on them because they've moved into a different tangent on their experiments activities, but they need to document. That's the key words because we're going to have the document so that the time for that's been spent on it, and therefore the cost of labour is able to be verified. The cost of external experts and consultants and contractors is also to be verified. So who's the competent professionals that have been approached? Any other experts that they've approached? Material identified from other sources. And the key reason all this has been documented is that an inquiry from Oz Industry or the tax office might be years down the track. And some of these people may have left, they may have gone back overseas. I worked on one project where there was about 35 people involved, and nearly 30 of them were all overseas visitors to Australia. A lot of them were international students undertaking some work while they were here. And by the time any inquiry was made by a government agency, they would probably be back in their home countries. And trying to find them then to get input as to what they worked on is virtually impossible. And that's why it's imperative that these records are kept properly right from the start. Then they can undertake a review, complete the form which I've identified, item 9, as evidence of your purpose. What was all this about? Go through the checklist. They can then prepare the plan, and hopefully they've used the documentation contained in 5507 to develop the plan. And there's some key things there, key concepts that they may have covered in the plan. You might have noticed there's talks about overseas findings applications. It's very difficult to get approval from the tax office to conduct research and development research overseas. Oz Industry would be involved in that decision as well. You've got to come up that there's only some unique positions in the world or locations in the world that particular research can be conducted, and none of those facilities are available in Australia to get approval to undertake the research overseas. It's very difficult. And then I suggest that you develop the research and development budget, submits to the manager, goes to the board of directors. As I've said earlier, we have forms there which will cover that process. So you've got the suggested minute that the board of directors would sign off on, and you're underway. And then you move into the next flow chart, which is not part of the introductory package. So that's the overview of research and development. I hope that you will be able to use it, and we can then move in to the next phase of this process. Now, if you need any advice, as I said earlier, please contact us. Send me an email, Peter at ESS BIZTOOLS, or make a telephone call, 074724 1118, and I will get back to you. We are looking for input on research and development. This is the start of the innovation journey. I've recorded another webinar yesterday on the innovation journey, so have a look at that as well, because it was also for members. It's the research and development project that's the cornerstone to innovation. And I believe that we, as a profession, should be seen to be very proactive in assisting our SME clients to undertake this journey. They need our advice. They need our encouragement and assistance to get underway. And that will open up the opportunities for your client to raise additional government grants. It will bring into play where they're going to get the money from. And I think we'll bring in external funding considerations, perhaps raising capital as an early stage innovation company or a crowdsourced funding equity raising company. All those items for the future. But what will also come into the future is your client will then need business plans, predictive accounting reports, corporate governance knowledge, an overview of what these ways that private companies can raise capital from the public are all about, because they need to be able to understand those, to have conversations with advisors, government officials, and potential directors of the company. But all that's in the future. This is all about giving you the resources that when you've got a client sitting opposite you who you're talking to, you might be an accountant or a bookkeeper. You're having these discussions, and the client mentions that they've been conducting some research and development. We wanted to have a package that you could immediately click onto on your screen and say, well, are you a company? Do you intend to spend more than $20,000 in the financial year on legitimate? And always stress the word legitimate to your clients, because their opinion of what might be eligible and what the law says is eligible can be a little bit different. So we need to make sure that they fully understand that process. Stay safe. Have a great day. Goodbye. And I look forward to hearing from you on any questions or suggestions that you have. Thank you. Bye.